Before I introduce the rabbi, I want to mention tonight's shir is dedicated to the Aliyah's Neshama, Abatya Bat Devora, and Aryeh Leib, which have Aliyah's Neshama. And the rabbi, he's here, I say almost half a year, but Baruch Hashem, psychologist. He has an office here in Yerushalayim, as well as Lakewood and in New York. He's thousands of people watch his videos every week, and he is internationally known to speak about current events, and especially the Ramchal, the thought process, the method of learning. He learned mainly from the method of the Ramchal, and he teaches it widely. And he's a Musmach of Moshe Feinstein. And without any further ado, Rabbi Kessin.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Haolam Shachnu Boy. It's good to be back in Yerushalayim, I have to say. We are now in the 9 days. And part of the problem that we have with the 9 days is that it's very difficult to mourn something that you really don't know. You know, you can only mourn something that you are aware of, that you know the value or the significance of what you lost. But what happens if you don't really know the significance of what you lost? And it's very hard to mourn that because you don't realize what its loss is, and so on. So that's why we have a difficulty in mourning. And not only that, the further away you get from the original event, Tisha B'Av, the harder it is to mourn. It's always like that, you know. I imagine in the first year or two or whatever, decade after the destruction of the second temple, even the first temple, which both occurred, of course, on Tisha B'Av, I imagine the mourning was really tremendously very severe, very intense. But obviously we are what? We're almost 2,000 years away from that period of time. And as a result of that, the intensity of mourning diminishes, which is expected. However, the period of the 9 days is very, very significant. There's certain ideas which I would like to share with you, speak about, maybe in order to heighten the effect of how we should feel. And it's really worth thinking about. We fast on Tisha B'Av. There's the other 5, what's called Inuyim, the 5 different things that we do not do. But really, what Tisha B'Av really needs is a tremendous amount of thinking or thought in order to really understand it. So I'd like to therefore introduce certain ideas about Tisha B'Av. But what I also want to do is something which I don't know if I've ever done before. I want to indicate also something about the consolation. Consolation means, how can we feel a little, not good about it, but is there any way we can have some type of hope that in some way this will end? You see. And so I'd like to introduce some of the ideas, those ideas also. Especially what I've been saying for really a couple of years already in my current events lectures, which are on the internet, which I'm sure everybody knows and so on, is I try to introduce some type of hope among people that we're really at the end. It's not as bleak as it used to look, World War I, World War II, the Holocaust and so on. But there are different things happening today which of course verify in a certain manner that we are really very close to the end. So as a result of that, I do want to speak a little about the concept of nechama, or consolation, even though that type of a shir is really appropriate for Shabbos Nachmo. Are you having something for Nachmo? No. So we'll double up, right? Okay. In any case, so therefore I want to again speak about certain ideas. First idea, which I always say, which I've said in the past, which is really very important, because people, feel that way. Why are we mourning in the first place? This happened. Not only did it happen, almost 2,000 years ago. That's a long time for something to occur. But the real question is, what do you want from me? I didn't do anything, right? I didn't live at that time, unless you were familiar with your Gilgal. Maybe you did. But basically, I don't think most of us did. So why are we mourning in the first place? Usually when you mourn, there's something that you contributed in a certain way. Not that you caused it, but you're part of that. We're not part of that tragedy, really. So the real question is, why do we mourn? You see, we didn't cause it. They caused it, as the Gemara says. Sinas Chinam. The first temple was destroyed. The first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of the three Averos Chamuros, which of course is Gilui Arayos, incest, adultery, Shvichas Damim, which is murder, and Avodah Zarah, which is idolatry. That was the first Beis Hamikdash, and also maybe because they didn't make brachas for Torah, whatever that means, first. But certainly the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of Sinas Chinam, baseless or groundless hatred. So the question is that if I was not around then, why am I in some way commemorating that event? And the answer to that, really, when you really think about it, is that we really are guilty. We really are. Not because we caused the destruction of the temple, but because we caused the inability of the temple to be built again. That's right. So because of what we do, our sins, the Beis Hamikdash cannot be built at all. So therefore we can certainly be held guilty for that. And we have, of course, the famous Gemara, I think it's Yerushalmi, Kol Dor Shelo Nivneh Beis Hamikdash B'Yomov. Any generation in which the Beis Hamikdash was not built in its day, Kinu Nechrav B'Yomov. It's as if it was destroyed. What does that mean, really? What it means is something very interesting. It means that when Rosh Chodesh Av comes about, all of a sudden, it's not like there's nothing that happens. There's a tremendous din Torah in Shemayim. There's a tremendous heavenly court case in heaven. Should we build the Beis Hamikdash again or not? Because there is always a force that says the Beis Hamikdash has to stand. It's not like the Rebbeinu Shem says, well, it's destroyed and that's the end of the entire matter. No. There's a tremendous force. It's what's called the Tzad HaKidusha, the side of holiness, that in certain ways demands or wants the Beis Hamikdash to be built. And therefore, well, if you want to build the Beis Hamikdash, let's re-examine the reason why it was destroyed. And of course, if the reason why it was destroyed is no longer extant, so we build it. There's a court case. It's important to remember. There's a tremendous force in Shemayim, in heaven, that wants the Beis Hamikdash to be built. Of course, the origin or the greatest force is God. The Rebbeinu Shem wants to come back to the Jewish people. In a certain sense, that's our greatest hope. If He would have abandoned us, then it is hopeless. But the Rebbeinu Shem doesn't want this to continue. However, He Himself has voluntarily submitted Himself to call din or justice. You see, of course He could bring it back in a nanosecond if He wants. But He has voluntarily, as I said, submitted Himself to dinam, to justice. Because the world basically runs through justice. And therefore He has submitted Himself to that. And therefore He won't do that. He will not override His original intent in the creation itself. We have to earn the Beis Hamikdash to be built in the first place, certainly to continue, and certainly to be rebuilt. That's the way it has to be. Without going into a lot of ideas that are associated with this concept. So therefore, there's a tremendous force that wants the Beis Hamikdash to be built. So there's a great din Torah, a heavenly tribunal in heaven, you see, that examines should it be built or not. And they examine it. And they take a look. Well, are the sins which destroyed the Beis Hamikdash initially, do they still exist? And the answer is yes. Sinas Chinam is a killer in Klal Yisrael. You see, there are many reasons for sinas chinam. There's gaiva, arrogance. There's jealousy. There's intolerance. You don't like. What do you mean? You don't hold what I say? Who are you? There's so much that goes on that is responsible, causes sinas chinam, and they examine sinas chinam. One of the things that they really examine, what causes a lot of sinas chinam is lashon hara and rechilus. Lashon hara causes sinas chinam. When you walk over to a guy and you say to the guy, by the way, did you hear what somebody did? Tell that to a third person. That is lashon hara. You see? And if you say, do you know what he said about you? Where the receiver is identical to the object of the action, that's rechilus. See? So there's a tremendous amount of lashon hara and rechilus and so on. And that causes tremendous amount of sinas chinam. And as a result of that, God examines that, or actually it's the Bezdin that examines that. And unfortunately, or tragically I should say, the Jewish people are found to be guilty of the very same sins that were committed 2,000 years ago. So, of course, with that kind of outcome, what's the judgment going to be? It cannot be rebuilt. And in heaven, when something cannot happen, which would have been incredibly good, it is what's called tantamount, equal to, right? The fact that you now destroyed an existing building. Same thing. To prevent the resurrection or the rebuilding of a Beis Hamikdash is identical to destroying a standing Beis Hamikdash. Therefore, if it's not built by Tisha B'Av, so what do we got? Let's say today's Sunday, we're in Av and so on and so forth. We got another week? Yeah, actually less than a week and so on. If that Beis Hamikdash is not built in a week, guess what? We caused the destruction. It's a very important concept because it ties us to Tisha B'Av. We are not commemorating, a historical event. We are mourning a present-day event that happened, and therefore we need to mourn what we just did. Now that's something to think about, because in those days they destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. Everybody can see it was being destroyed by the Romans. But today we don't see that because it's a heavenly case. It's a heavenly tribunal case. So of course we don't see it, so we don't even think about it. But you have to be aware of what the Yerushalmi says. If it's not built by Tisha B'Av, we cause the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. It's a very important idea, because I think a lot of people have problems relating to Tisha B'Av because they said, what are we doing? Why am I busy involved in this when I didn't do it? In any case, the answer is, you did do it. I did it. You did it. We all did it. And that's why the Beis Hamikdash does not stand. Because fundamentally, there's an incredible amount of sinas chinam, lashon hara, and rechilus going on a daily basis. And you can go into, I have a whole shira about what lashon hara does and so on and so forth. And clearly it's enormously prevalent and so on. That's why there's such an incredible disunity among the Jewish people. Anyway, so that's the first idea that I would like to say. Now the next question is this. Okay, Tisha B'Av, which is the Churban itself. What's the meaning of the Churban, really? What does it really mean? And for that, I want to bring down a Gemara, which is a very fascinating Gemara. It's at the end of Masechta Makos, and I'm going to say the Gemara, okay? And then I'm going to present a lot of difficult questions, and then I'm going to go over it again and answer all the questions. And what emerges is in many ways, the secret of what Tisha B'Av is really all about. The Gemara is in the end of Makos, and it goes like this. Shuv Pam Achas, once happened, Hoya Oilin Yerushalayim, the group of 4 people, the great Tanoim, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and Rabbi Akiva. 4 of them among the greatest Jewish people, of course, in the last 2,000-3,000 years. And they were walking, okay? And then it says, Hoya Oilin Yerushalayim, they went to Jerusalem. They went up to Jerusalem. Now, Kivin Shegiu Lahar Hatzofim, so they arrived at Har Hatzofim, which is where the Hebrew University is today, and that is, I think, one of the most distant points that you can actually see the actual, today it's the mosque, but you can see the entire what's called Makkah Migdash and so on. And all of a sudden, they're standing there, at the Har HaTzofim, okay, and what did they do? Kol Big Dam. They rent their clothes because it's an Avelus. When you're looking at the Beis HaMikdash in its destructive state, then it's Shiva, so you tear your garments. Then it says, Kivan Shu Higiu LaHar Bayis. Then they went further to the Har Bayis, which is the actual Beis HaMikdash, the place where the Beis HaMikdash stood. Rosh Shul Sheyotza. They saw a fox coming out of it. Now remember, this is the Kodesh Kedoshim. What is the Kodesh Kedoshim? It is the most sacred place in the entire universe. So sacred that when the Beis HaMikdash stood and there was a Kodesh Kedoshim, angels could not go through that place. And if anybody went to that place in a time when he was not allowed to, and the only one who can go in there basically is a Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. If he went in not on Yom Kippur, he would immediately die because he could not tolerate the Kedusha. So they're taking a look at the Har HaBayis, right? They see a fox coming out of the Kodesh Kedoshim, out of the Holy of Holies. Could you believe this? An animal is coming out of the greatest, holiest place in the entire universe. In fact, what is probable is the entire, you know, heard of the Big Bang Theory, right? Where it started from something and just exploded, whatever, and now it's the universe is, as they say, what they say is 12.7 billion light years, and so on. Where was the point of the Big Bang? It was the Kodesh Kedoshim. It's interesting, you know, and so on, you know, and obviously it expanded enormously very quickly and so on. But the Kodesh Kedoshim really is the gateway into the spiritual universe. In other words, if you could go into the Kodesh Kedoshim today and in some way locate what's called the zipper and zip it down and open up the garment, you would see Olam Asiyah, the higher places of Olam Asiyah, and so on. That is really the entry into a whole different dimension and so on. But in any case, they saw that. So, of course, what was their response? They started crying, which is obviously because these people, obviously, among the greatest of the sages, totally identify with the loss of the Beis HaMikdash. For Rabbi Akiva, and the Gemara continues, Mesachek, he was smiling. Although Mesachek could be laughing, but I hope he wasn't laughing. He was smiling. Now obviously there's an incredible difference between them and him. They're crying, and really crying, and he's smiling. So Amrullah, so they said to him, so the first question is, well, I might as well ask you the questions now. A fox came out of that. Why a fox? Nothing is by accident, you see. So what is the fox alluding to? It's a message from God that of all the animals that could have come out of it, it's a fox. What's the message here? And there's a message, you see. So that's the first question I would ask. Rabbi Akiva Masachek, Rabbi Akiva is laughing or smiling, right? So that's highly inappropriate behavior for the Beis HaMikdash, and this is a Kodesh Kedoshim. So then the question, of course, is, what is he doing? So they obviously noted that he was smiling, and they're crying, right? So Amrullah, so they said to him, why are you smiling? I mean, there's such an incredible difference. So they actually asked him, what are you smiling about? Or maybe what are you laughing about, and so on. I mean, to them, you know, I mean, Rabbi Akiva was among the greatest of the sages. So they knew, of course, there was an underlying reason, you know. So they asked him, why are you smiling? Amalahem. So he said to them, why are you guys crying? That's a very interesting response, isn't it? You know, I know Jews are famous for answering questions with another question. You know, it's like the judge once asked a guy in court, you know, there was a Bezdin, there was a court case with a Jew as a defendant. And the Jew, when he was on the stand, so the prosecuting attorney would keep asking questions. And every time he answered with a question. So finally the judge looks at him and says, excuse me, is there any reason why you're always answering with a question? And the Jew, of course, looked at him and said, why not? Anyway, so the first thing which is difficult to understand is, what are you crying for? Why are you asking him a question? Why don't you answer? You see. The second thing is, what do you mean, why are you crying? It's obvious why they're crying. You know, the answer's obvious. They're looking at the Kodesh Kedoshim, destroyed, and a fox is coming out of it, and he's asked them, why are you crying? Like, I mean, you really don't understand why they're crying? And the third thing, right, is Matem Boichem, why are you crying? Besides the fact that it's obvious why, like I said before, he should have really answered him directly and so on, But in any case, this is what he asked, which really is, of course, is a total mystery. So Amuloi, so they said to him, they answered him, Mokum Shekosav boy, there's a pasuk that says, Ve'hazor, and a non-kohen, right? Hakorev Yumas. If a non-kohen walks into the Beis HaMikdash, he dies, right? And now it's destroyed. Ve'achshav, and now, Shulam Holchuboy, foxes are coming out of it. V'lo nivke, we shouldn't cry? Like, what question is that? And besides that, if Rabbi Akiva thought for whatever reason that you don't have to cry, can you tell me why we're commemorating Tisha B'Av? Why do we have Tisha B'Av? We might as well make a party and smile, right? So obviously that's not true. So the question, of course, is what is Rabbi Akiva doing? Omar lahen, so he says to them, Lokachani matzachek, I will tell you why I'm smiling and laughing, okay? And he's going to reveal to them a very profound secret. Dersiv, says a pasuk. God says, this is in the Navi saying, I'm going to take two witnesses that will testify, you see, to the destruction and the redemption. Who are these two witnesses? Uriah HaKohen and Zechariah ben Yeverechyohu. These two people who are prophets, by the way. Okay? I'm going to take both of these individuals as witnesses to the destruction and basically the destruction. So Rabbi Akiva asks, you're taking two witnesses, fine. Why these two people? What does Uriah, the prophet, have to do with Zechariah? Why? Uriah b'mikdash rishon. Uriah is a Novi who prophesied in the first Beis HaMikdash. Zechariah is a Novi who practiced or who's existed in the second Beis HaMikdash. So why do we bring two witnesses who are at least a couple of 100 years apart? What's the connection? Elo, Rabbi Akiva says, Torah Kosev, the Torah says that the Nevuah of Zechariah, right, that the prophecy of Zechariah, that prophesied about the redemption, is contingent or dependent on Nevuah Shel Uriah, on the prophecy of Uriah, who prophesied the destruction. One prophecy, the fulfillment is dependent on the prophecy of redemption. By Uriah it says, by Uriah prophesied about the destruction, it says, because of your sins is Zion, Beis HaMikdash, plowed like a field. You see. And what that means, obviously, is that not only is it not inhabitable, you see, it'll be plowed as if it was a field. It's not even a residence anymore, you see. And by Zechariah it says, a famous pasuk, Oid Yeshu Zakenim Uzakenis B'Rechoves Yerushalayim. There will yet come a time, and this is the redemption, there will come a time when Jerusalem will have old people, Zakenim and Zakenois, on the streets of Jerusalem. An incredible prophecy. That means people will live over at least 150 years. That's how old that people live for a long time, for many reasons, and so on. So Rabbi Akiva continues and says, until the prophecy of Uriah that prophesied destruction, I was afraid maybe the Nevuah of Zechariah, that redemption, would not be fulfilled. Now that I see that the prophecy of Uriah is fulfilled, because I'm looking at the destruction of the temple, so clearly, totally, the Nevuah of Zechariah, that prophecy of redemption, will surely come to pass. So the Gemara says something very interesting. Beloshen hazeh, in this expression, omuloi, these three people said to him, Akiva nichamtonu, Akiva, you have consoled us. Akiva nichamtonu, Akiva, you have consoled us. Why the double language? You see. Now, what's interesting about this Gemara is that it also conforms to the pasuk in the Torah. This the Haftorah of Shabbos Nachmu is Nachmu Nachmu Ami, where God says, be comforted, my people. He says it twice. Why the double expression of Nechama? So that seems to have something to do with Akiva Nichamtonu, Akiva Nichamtonu. You see, it's interesting. There's clearly some kind of connection. The question is, what kind of discussion is this? Why is he smiling? Why is he answering a question? There's no Tisha B'Av? Like, what's going on here? And what is that which Rabbi Akiva is really saying? Well, if you go back to the beginning of the story, again, it says they went to Jerusalem, they went to Hatzofim, and then Koru Bigdehem, they rent their garments. Notice, it doesn't say that those three rent their garments and not Rabbi Akiva. They all rent their garments, which shows that, of course, Rabbi Akiva mourns. You see, it clearly indicates that he also rent his garments. So therefore, obviously, then the mystery, of course, is, so why are you smiling? If you agree, of course, that you have to, behave in the same manner, which is mourning, you see. So they were crying, which is obvious, and he's laughing. So they said to him, why are you laughing? So he said to them, why are you crying? What is he really saying? It's not a question, it's an answer. He's saying, why are you crying? Because you're mourning. Because you realize the destruction of the temple and the incredible loss. Do you not understand that that is the tikkun of the Churban? The fact that you're crying and you recognize that it is an incredible loss, that's what God wants. You know, it's like a father. Imagine a father has a son, right? And he gives his son everything, and the son does not appreciate it. So he speaks disrespectfully to the father, he ignores his father's advice, whatever, right? So what's the father going to do to his kid? So what the father does is he throws his kid out. He says, you obviously don't understand the significance that I am to you. What's the Yeshua? What's the remedy? Get out. Let's see what you do on your own. You see, he throws the son out. After a month or two, the kid realizes, what did I do? Am I crazy? My father was incredible to me. He provided me with all the needs. He protected me. He was great. And I just disrespected him. I got to go back and beg him to let me in. And that's exactly what the father wants to hear, doesn't he? Because he doesn't want to really throw his son out. He wants his son to come back. But he needs to teach his son a lesson. The significance, you see, of who he is and what he does for the child. It's the same with the Rebbe Shalom. You obviously don't understand who I am and what I do for you. That really all the protection that you have, everything, all the bounty, everything is from me. But you don't appreciate it because you don't listen to me. On the contrary, you're worshiping idols, right? You hate each other. Like, what is all this? There's only one way I have to teach you what the story is. I got to throw you guys out of Israel. You see, I need to destroy the temple, leave the temple, right, where you won't see me anymore, and just you're on your own, and then I got to throw you into the nations of the world. Let's see how you fare with those guys. You see? So then, what do we realize as Jews? How in the world did we give up God for this? You see? So it comes out that mourning the Beis Hamikdash is the remedy, is the tikkun itself. That's what Rabbi Akiva is saying. Why are you crying? You're crying because you realize the incredible destruction, the loss of what you had, right? And therefore, that is the tikkun. And that's why I'm smiling. Because I see you guys are bringing the tikkun. I see you're doing exactly what God wants. And therefore, definitely God will bring us back. See? Now it makes sense. So Rabbi Akiva is looking at the other end. And the Tanoim are looking at the front end. You know, the destruction itself. But Rabbi Akiva was looking beyond that. He said, wait a minute. That means that the Jews really do mourn. And they appreciate the loss. And the mourning indicates that really want to come back to their father. Therefore, if the tikkun is happening, it's going to happen. So therefore, I'm smiling. You see, it's called an anticipatory smile, or an expecting reward, and so on. But they didn't get it. They didn't understand what Rabbi Akiva was saying. They thought it was a question. Really, it was an answer. So Amruloi, so they said to him, what do you mean why we're crying? A place that it says that a non-Kohen will walk into, right? And he can die, we shouldn't mourn. So then Rabbi Akiva understood that they're not getting what I'm saying. I'm looking at the fact that you guys are doing the tikkun. You're looking at the fact of mourning the Beis Hamikdash. So I have to obviously be more explicit. So then he brings down the prophecy. You have Uriah describing the destruction of prophesying, the destruction of the temple. You have Zechariah prophesying the redemption. So he says like this, Rabbi Akiva, until the prophecy of Zechariah, Uriah happened, the destruction, I wasn't sure that there would be a redemption. But now that it did, there will be redemption. What's Rabbi Akiva saying? He's saying this, is that the destruction of the temple, right, is the remedy. You need to go through a destruction to understand what you've lost. So until there was a destruction, there's no remedy, you see. Then it all is a bunch of sins. But now that I see that the prophecy of Uriah, it will be destroyed, and that came true, that there was a destruction, and therefore the remedy can happen. So therefore the prophecy that there will be redemption definitely will happen, because there is a remedy, and it happened, you see. So what Rabbi Akiva is saying is that we have to understand, when we look at Churban, we're really looking at remedy. That's really what it is. It's an unfortunate remedy, that's true. But really it is the tikkun that will save us. If the Beis HaMikdash was not destroyed, we could never get back to God again. You see, and we could never get the Beis HaMikdash. Because it is only the Beis HaMikdash, when that is destroyed, that we will realize what we are missing and what it means to be godless without the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's a very profound concept that Rabbi Akiva is saying. What does that mean? So Rabbi Akiva is saying two things. The first thing he's saying is that, hey, it was destroyed, you guys are doing the remedy because you're crying, which means that he recognized the Jewish people do that remedy, right? So what does that mean? That there will be redemption, which means that the suffering will end. It's called Gamze Yavo. There will be an end to the suffering. But the second thing is we realize something greater. Because a guy can say, imagine a guy gets thrown in prison, right? And he's there for 20 years. And all of a sudden he gets out because of whatever diplomatic pressure and so on, right? But he mourns the 20 years of loss. 20 years down the drain. For what? You see? So even if he has a nechama, which is a comfort, a consolation, right? That I'm getting, that it will end, there's no consolation for the time of suffering. So that's what Rabbi Akiva said. You should know, the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash is the cure. Without that, you could never have been redeemed. So that's what Rabbi Akiva is saying. You should know that if it wasn't for the churban of the Bayis Rishon, Bayis Sheni, then Klal Yisrael could never have been redeemed. So that is your cure. Without that, there is no cure. You see? And that's the second nechama, where we say, thank God we suffered. In many ways, it's like a surgeon. Imagine a guy, he's diagnosed with whatever bad stuff, right? You see? So the surgeon says, listen, I got to operate, right? Now, is the guy going to say, operate? What, are you crazy? Why am I going to do an operation? But the answer is, what do you mean? You thank God he can operate and cure you. So, it's unfortunate that you have to have an operation, right? But the operation, in that sense, but the operation is a sense of joy. Thank God there's a remedy. There's a surgery. That's what Rabbi Akiva is saying. He consoles the Chachomim two ways. One, it will end. And that's the prophecy of Zechariah. But not only that, the real Nechama is that you had to have the Beis HaMikdash destroyed, or the redemption could never have happened. So therefore we don't feel as bad, because we know, hey, the suffering wasn't what's called in Yiddish umzist. The suffering wasn't for nothing. It was the remedy. So unfortunately we had to do it, but thank God, God gave us a remedy to get out of this pickle. You see, that's why it's a double Lashon. Nichamtonu Akiva, Nichamtonu. And they answered twice. You have consoled this Rabbi Akiva that it will end, because again you made us conscious of that. Of course they knew it would end, but you brought it again to our consciousness. But what's so beautiful is that our bechia is the remedy. And if we didn't cry, then we would never stop crying. You see, that was the remedy for the redemption. And that's the second expression of Nichatonu. You have consoled us once by it's going to be over, and you have consoled us the second time, is that the actual, the suffering itself, the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, is the very reason why we can have the redemption. Very important concept, So even though we realize the tragedies that the Beis HaMikdash destroyed, But we don't understand, without that destruction, we would be finished, because we'd have no remedy to what the Jews did. You see, and that's critical concept. And that's why we understand several ideas. That's why God says, Nachmu, Nachmu, Ami. Be consoled, be consoled. God is telling us two incredible things. One is that there will be a geula, there will be a redemption, so all this sorrows will end. But the second concept is, I want to tell you, the Rebbe Shem says, Nachmu, Nachmu, Ami, that the reason why you had to go through this isn't because it was capricious, because that was the remedy that you had to go through, and therefore you could be redeemed. And that is a tremendous nechama, so we don't feel as bad by the fact that we have gone through such suffering. You see, it's a very important concept. And that's why it also says, famous Chazal, Kolamas Abel al Yerushalayim, anybody who mourns Jerusalem, Zoicha v'roya, he merits and he sees Simchosa, the binyana. What's a Zoicha? It should just say anybody who mourns, right, will see the building of the Beis HaMikdash. What's it? Zoicha, he merits. Because if he mourns, then he has done the remedy. And if he has done the remedy, he merits to see the redemption. Beautiful. It's exactly what it means. You know, it's unfortunately, suffering is the remedy, you see. And that's why there's a beautiful medrash where it says that in the end of time, Knesset Yisrael, and this is the Messianic era, Knesset Yisrael, the Jewish people, right, will come over to the God, Rebbe, and say, they cannot be consoled. So what the Rebbe will do is very interesting. He's going to do this. He's going to send them Moshe Rabbeinu. Medrash says this, go console my people. He goes, and whatever he says, they're not consoled. Aaron HaKohen, Shmuel HaNavi, Yeshaya, Yirmiyahu, it's like everybody's a who's who, and they will not be consoled. Finally, the Rebbe says, you know, I will console them. And it says that the Rebbe goes and consoles Klal Yisrael, and they are consoled. The question is why? The Rebbe obviously has infinite intelligence, but what did he say that none of the Nevi'im could say? And the answer is this, because all of them basically said, it's over. You know, thank God it's over. The Rebbe Shem's Rachmanis that it was over. But they can never say why it happened. Only God can say, I will tell you exactly what the remedy was. You need to be a doctor for that. Exactly how will this cure, you see? And only the Rebbe Shem can do that. That's why the Rebbe Shem says, Nachmu, Nachmu, Ami, be consoled, it'll end. Be consoled, you had to go through it. And he can explain every single day of why every single person had to absorb and go through tremendous suffering. Yom Elokechem, your God, because no man can console the Jews. Only God can, because only God is privy to that information of exactly how the surgery worked. Very important concept. And that's the beauty of that medrash and why there's a double lashon and so on. And now you understand a very interesting idea that it says the Mashiach ben David will be born on Tisha B'Av. You know? Now, if you're born on Tisha B'Av, it doesn't mean you will be the Mashiach. You know? And so on. But if you are the Mashiach, it says that you're born on Tisha B'Av. But I want to tell you something. Not really. What does it mean that the Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av? It means that because of Tisha B'Av, we give birth to the redemption. Because that's the surgery. You see, it doesn't mean the man is actually born on Tisha B'Av. Although, you never know. You know? Part of the reason why Shabtai Tzvi was able to fool everybody, because he was born on Tisha B'Av. I don't know if you know that, but he was actually born on Tisha B'Av. But it doesn't really mean to be born on Tisha B'Av. It means that since you went through Tisha B'Av, you gave birth to the Mashiach. That's what it really means, you see. And as a result of that, this we see is what the Gemara is. So Rabbi Akiva is really telling us a profound concept, that if it's not for Tisha B'Av, we cannot be redeemed. That's what he's telling us. And that's why he said, why are you crying? That's the remedy. And of course they didn't understand, so he had to then go obviously and explain it and so on. The question is, how is that the remedy really? Okay, that's the Gemara. That's what the Gemara says, that it's a remedy. But how is it really a remedy? Well, for that we have to look really at another Gemara. And this Gemara is in Brochus. It's the third daf in Brochus. And over there it says, incredible Agadata. It says there, and it repeats it twice, but anyway, it says there that we learned in the Brisa. What does it say? That God roars like a lion 3 times a day. It says that the night has 3 watches, which means 3 different periods of time, and different things happen with angels and Kabbalistically, and without getting into that. Okay, and at the end of each watch, God roars like a lion. You see, he roars like a lion. And what does he say? There's a brisa. What does he say? He says, Oy lebonam, woe is to the children, sheba avonesehem, because of their sins, right? I have destroyed my bias, my temple, and I have burnt my sanctuary, and I have exiled my people amongst the nations of the world. That's what it says. And that is repeated right after that, where it says Rabbi Yossi went into a churva, into a desolate place, and people say it was actually also the Makom Mikdash. And he met Eliyahu. Eliyahu was outside waiting for him. I mean, imagine who these people had in contact with Eliyahu Navi, you know. So there was a discussion, and Eliyahu Navi asked him, Rabbi Yossi, the great Rabbi Yossi, he asked him, did you hear anything while you're there? You see? So Rabbi Yossi said, yes, I did. I heard a bas kol. A bas kol is a form of communications of the Rabbanu Shalom, where all of a sudden there's a divine voice. Now, the only ones who can hear this are tzaddikim. You have to be incredibly righteous to hear this. If, however, you feel that you do hear this, then you immediately have to go for a psychiatric consultation, because that's basically what it means. However, if you are righteous, then it's probably a bas kol. And what is a bas kol? A bas kol is a communique that is given out by heaven. It's an unusual kind of communique. And the bas kol here, so this Rabbi Yossi said, I heard a bas kol. What did it say? The same thing. It said, woe is to the children. God says this. And he's, that woe is to my children, that I have burnt, destroyed my house, I have burnt my sanctuary, and I have exiled them among the nations of the world. This is what he says. So Eliyahu Hanavi says, you should know one thing. You heard it now once because you were there, but 3 times a day God says this. What does that mean? That the Baruch Shem says that, you know? So we think, you know, we have the opinion, it's 2,000 years. You know, God has forgotten about us. Forget about it. He has forgotten us, he has abandoned us. It's over with. From here you see, not only has the Baruch Shem not forgotten us, but 3 times every night, imagine, for 2,000 years, the Baruch Shem is screaming like a lion, right? Saying, it's terrible what I had to do because of them. Terrible. You see, and this is God. This isn't a malach, you know, or some representation, some representative and so on. It's the Baruch Shem himself. Now, why does a lion roar? A lion roars when it's agitated, usually, you know. It's agitated and it starts roaring, right? And when a lion roars, you get out of the way, obviously, because it's agitated, right? And it's going to do something, and you don't want to be around when it does something. That means God is agitated. That's what it means. Kaviyachal. I mean, the Baruch Shem, he's an infinite being, he doesn't get agitated, obviously. But in human expression, he's agitated. Why? Because he can't believe what he had to do. You see? The Jews, they should have kept the mitzvahs and tshuva. Instead, what did they do? They sinned with all kinds of sin, aschina and lashon hara, and whatever other sins, and they had to throw them out. He had to destroy his temple. So the Baruch Shem says, they forced me to do it. So we're looking at a being that is the greatest being of all, who is agitated 3 times a day, that he and his people, his children, are not together. That's an incredible message of hope, even though it led to serious consequences. But what a message, that the supreme being of the universe is agitated, that we're not in his house. Think about that, you know. So he hasn't forgotten us at all, you see. Now, but he says 3 things. The Baruch Shem says 3 things. 1, I burnt my house. I destroyed my house. What is that? I destroyed my house and therefore I left. It's called Siluk Shechina. The first thing which is terrible is I left the house. I let them alone, which means I abandoned Klal Yisrael. The Beis Hamikdash is no more, and therefore there's no residence for me. The second thing the Rebbe says is I burnt my Heichal. What does that mean? Is I actually physically destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. Not only has my divine presence, the Shekhinah, left, but I have physically destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. So what does that mean, really, as we will see? But that's the second thing. And the third thing is I sent them out amongst the Goyim, into the Golas. And with the Goyim is all kinds of terrible things. Forget about, that I'm not even around. The Goyim persecute them, right? They shoilet over them. They block them from doing spirituality, which we see going on today in England and even in New York City, and so on. They block them from doing ruchnias, you see. And not only that, but they block them and so on. They persecute them. And in the end, they kill them. You see? Which is the Holocaust, the pogroms, the inquisitions, and the expulsions and so on, What does that really all mean? So those are the three expressions that God uses. One, that He left. Two, right? That there is no Beis Hamikdash. And number three is that He threw them out of the house, Eretz Yisrael, and they have to go to the Umas HaOlam. In many ways, those are the three things where we have Golas. There are three things that are going to Golas, and I will explain what Golas is. There are three things. The divine presence goes into Golas, the Shekhinah, and you have to understand what that means. The divine presence itself goes into Golas. Then the Torah goes into Golas. That's right. The Torah itself goes into Golas. And the third thing is the Jewish people. There is a fourth thing called Eretz Yisrael. But right now we'll focus on these three. There are three things that go into exile when exile is decreed. There's a divine presence, the Shekhinah, Torah itself, and then we have the Jewish people. Okay. This is what this is who goes into Golas. So the first question is why? And the answer is because mystically they are an identicality. An identicality means that they are equal to each other. In other words, they are just different manifestations of the same thing, which is a very important Kabbalistic concept. And say, what's a good example? Water. Water has three forms. It's ice, and then it could be water, and then it could be steam. But guess what? It's all H2O, same molecule. But just that water has three different states of existence, and so on. We don't realize it, but there are three different things that are really identical, but they have different forms. One is the divine presence itself. The Shekhinah itself is one form. The second form is Klal Yisrael, is the Torah. The Torah really is another form of God in a certain sense. And the third form is the Jewish people, the Neshama. We are really the flip side of the Shekhinah. In fact, if you really want to think about that, there's a coin. A coin has right side and left side. It's called heads and tails, right? But they're both part of the coin, right? It's just that one side looks different than the other side, right? Two different manifestations. What is the real truth? The truth is that the Shekhinah is the right side and Klal Yisrael is the left side. That's really what it is. And what the Baruch Hashem did is he split the coin with the right side, where the Shekhinah and the Jewish people called Knesset Yisrael, where they split. They split. But really, before the split, they are really an identical form, you see. Now, the Torah is the manifestation of God. In Kabbalah, the Torah is the totality of all the combinations of the spheres. The Torah is actually that type of form. In fact, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to give a shiur here, The Greatness of Torah, where you can understand what the Torah really is. In any case, but the Torah is really the manifestation of the totality of all the spheres, which are the divine forces that God did, and the Torah is nothing more than a basic description of that. But in any case, so you have God, you have His acts, which are the spheres, and you have the repercussions of His acts of the spheres, which is the neshama of the Jewish people. It's really an identicality, but we don't realize that, you see. So therefore, when God decrees exile, He decrees exile. All three go into exile. He goes into exile. The Torah goes into exile, you see, and the Jewish people go into exile. Therefore, all three go into exile. What does that mean, that all three go into exile? Or what is the manifestation of the exile? Well, the first thing to understand is, what does it mean that God goes into exile? How can a being that's omnipotent, you see, omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, how can God go into exile? What does that even mean? Where's he going to go? You see. But what it means is the following. And this is a very important idea, which I had mentioned quite a while ago. What it means is the following. This is a very important concept to understand or to know in terms of the Tisha B'Av. In the beginning of time, there was Adam, Harishon, and Chava. They were the first man and woman, you see. Now, Adam's Harishon's job, as well as Chava, but whatever, Adam's job was to ignore the advice of the snake. And the snake was what? Was a manifestation of the Satan. He's the mouthpiece of the Satan, trying to convince Adam to sin. Okay. He finally did. So God approached Adam and said, wait a minute. Your job was really to ignore the advice of the Satan, to ignore the advice of the Nachash, the primordial snake, right? And to ignore that advice, and that would have been the tikkun. That would have been the rectification, and I would have returned to the physical universe. But you didn't do that. So you have a new job now. Your job now is not to ignore the advice of the Satan. Your job now is to kill the Satan. Yes. You must destroy evil. It's not enough to ignore evil. You need to eliminate, to destroy evil, to obliterate it. The question is how? How can you obliterate evil? Without a powerful malach. And what the Rabbi did was very interesting. Everything needs to be connected to God. And God sends forth through the spheres a tremendous kedusha, holiness. It's a power that creates and maintains the existence of that being. Everybody's connected to God. It's like there's a cable that connects you to God. And that cable does what? Through that cable comes a certain divine energy or force. You see, and we exist because of that. If somebody were to walk over and cut that cable, you would instantly annihilate. Obviously, because you don't have the force in which you exist. The Kedusha, what's called a Shefa. In any case, so what the Rebbe did is he goes over to the Satan, who is also connected to God via cable, right? Everybody has to, or else you don't exist. And he cuts the cable, you see. He cuts the cable, and before the Satan is about to vanish, because that's what happened, he connects the cable to Adam Harishon. Now, there's only enough force coming down where only one side can exist, you see. And therefore, what's the relationship that we have to the Satan? It's called combat. We both are vying for the same divine energy. Therefore, if Adam Harishon and the Jews have replaced Adam Harishon, if they do the mitzvahs, you see, they do tshuva, whatever, then the force goes to them. Not only do they survive, but they flourish and prosper. They become tremendously spiritual. You see, what happens to the other side? If the Jews are taking it all, then the Satan gets weak, and ultimately he dies. Why? Because he's not getting that divine energy. That's the lifeblood of the Satan. What happens if the Jew sins? Then the Jews begin to weaken, you see, and the Satan grows strong. In fact, the Satan is the only angel that can grow in terms of his previous stature. No angel can change their position. Only the Malach, the Satan himself. Therefore, it's combat. So it's a war between the Satan and the Jews. And that determines history, you see. So therefore, what happened in that sense? So what God does when he voluntarily, when he goes into Golos, is he goes over to the Satan and says, listen, the Jews don't want me. And therefore, you are being yoinek. You are taking from the divine energy. So therefore, I will allow you to take from the divine energy. Measure for measure, this is justice. But as a result of that, what happens is that the agents of the Satan grow strong, and they begin to destroy the Jews. The whole concept, and God allows that because that's justice. You see, you don't want me, he will have me, but then he will use it as a force against us. You see, and of course for us, that is terrible. What is important to know is that there's no such thing as that the Jews don't bring down the force. No, it either goes to us or it goes to the Satan. It's one or the other. And history is determined by where the yonika, where does that nourishment go? You see. So the problem is that when God steps back, that's called the golus of the Shekhinah. When the Baruch Hashem says, listen, you could take from that force because it is yours judicially through justice, and then the Jews will suffer obviously terribly. That's the golus of the Shekhinah. And that's called in Hashkafa Shechinta Bigalusa. The divine presence is in golus. That's what it means that the Shekhinah goes in golus. It's where the Rebbeinu Hashem allows the Shekhinah, or he allows the Satan to take from that force and cause incredible amount of problems for the Jews. That's basically what it is. So the Shekhinah goes in golus. The second thing that goes in golus is the Torah. Because since the Torah is the energy or the force itself, you see, so that obviously is it's more in the hands of the Satan than of course it is in the hands of Klal Yisrael. So therefore, Torah changes. What does that mean? All of a sudden it's very difficult to understand Torah. That is the reason why, you learn Gemara looks like it's all over the place, disorganized. The concept of a disorganized Torah is the concept where the Satan takes from the power of the Torah and uses it himself. And therefore, it is very difficult for the Jew to access the Torah itself. There are other manifestations, but basically that's a critical manifestation. What's extremely difficult to learn Torah, just ask anybody who will ever learn Torah, Gemara, whatever, how difficult it is to come out and really understand, and so on. But in any case, and then of course the Jewish people go into Golus. Their Golus is what? Is in stages, right? First they are in Israel and the Romans take them over, right? That's first. The second thing is they even lose their land and they go into other countries, but the other countries just dominate them, right? And then after domination, after a while they begin to what? Persecute them. And after a while they begin to kill them and so on. So it's a stage type of thing. But the essential idea is Goyim have power or dominion over the Jewish people, you see. And that is therefore the concept of all three going into Golus. But what is really Golus when you think about that? And this is the interesting thing about that. What Golus is that you cannot be you. It's really what it is. When we say we're in exile from what? It's not that we are not in our right place. No, it's not a location. It's me. I can't be who I can be. I am completely frustrated. In other words, I cannot be and actualize my potential. That's really what Golus is. It is an inability of an individual to be what he is capable of being based on who he is. That's what Golus really is, you see. And you see that by the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah, the divine presence, cannot be what it is. And God wants to completely reveal himself and be close to the Jews. So therefore God, so to speak, cannot be his potential, if you want to look at it that way. The Torah cannot be its potential, right? Because the Torah is infinite. There's so much to Torah that when we would realize what it is, it'd just be mind-boggling what it is. And that will be revealed in the Messianic era of the totality or the incredible amount of what Torah really is. So it cannot express or reveal what it really is. That's why we need the Mashiach, which is, right, Kimol Oretz, for the nations, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God. That's the Torah out of the Golus. That's really what it is. And of course the Jewish people, when they leave the Golus, it doesn't mean they come from America or some other country, or even in Israel we're in Golus. Right? Don't kid yourself. We are in Israel, there's so much opposition to spirituality in Israel, tragically, and so on, right? We're all in Golus, you see. But when the Jews are back, that means all the forces, right, that would keep the Jews from being what they could be, their incredible potential, that's gone. And all of a sudden, the Jew grows. He grows exponentially into something that you would not even recognize. You would not recognize yourself in terms of who you really are. But Golus stops that. You see. So therefore, as a result of the Golus, what happens? One, we cannot connect to God, because He's gone, in that sense. When it says, and I will surely hide my face from people, that means we cannot connect to Him. There's no prophecy, there's no divine inspiration, right? What do we have today? It's very difficult, you see. It's very difficult to connect to God. We really have to labor even to think about Him during the day. How many times a whole day goes by? Did you think of God today? No. Most Jews, unfortunately, don't think of God at any time during the day, maybe for weeks or months or years, right? So connect to what? You're not even conscious of a divine being, you see. So therefore, the first gullus where we cannot be what we could be, right, is that we cannot connect to God as a divine being. The second thing is we can't even elevate ourselves. We can't. We try, we do this, we daven this, we do that, and then all of a sudden, we try this, doesn't work, we try that, doesn't work. You call up a chavrusa to learn Torah, and he says he can't make it today, he can't make it for the next 4 years. I mean, there's always something wrong. You see, we can't elevate ourselves. And it's a monumental task to move 1 inch in spirituality. How many times we go through a Yontif, Pesach, right? We walk out of the Yontif, right? It's Yisru Chag, right? You ask yourself, what happened? Other than eating so much matzah, and all the knedlach, right? And all the matzah brai, and the gefilte fish, and all that, other than the fact that I was off for 8 days, hopefully, right? I was off for 8 days, and other fact that I davened, okay, and in between the davening, I was schmoozing with my neighbor, whatever, where am I? Nowhere. See? And all we did, basically, when you leave a Yontif, the only thing you could say I accomplished is what? Is I gained 10 pounds. All right? But there's no movement towards spirituality. And really, when you think about it, every Yontif, you should walk away on a high of Ruchnias. But that's not what happens to us. We usually come out, to us, Ruchnias is a vacation. You see, it's not a spiritual elevation, and that explains why. You ever see these ads for Pesach to go with to where? To go with Acapulco. I think that's people don't even go to Acapulco anymore. Now it's you go to California, you go to Switzerland. You go. It's incredible where these guys are dreaming up. But why? Why is that happening? Because what do we get from the whole Pesach? I once spoke to somebody and they said for Pesach they're going to Thailand. I said, Thailand? Excuse me, do you know Thailand is one of the last places on earth that is terrible avodah zarah? What are you doing in Thailand? Well, why not? I mean, it's only Pesach. Right? And what else do you expect? That's why everybody's going away for Pesach. Not just because they don't want to do the work of Pesach, which really would have been a misiras nefesh for Ruchnius. But since it's a vacation, essentially, why not? You see, so we can't elevate ourselves. I mean, if it wasn't so tragic, it would be funny. You see, look, where have we come? What happened to the Jewish people? Could you imagine in the old days, the days of the Beis Hamikdash? Everybody was Oile Regel. You had to be Oile Regel. It was a mitzvah, right? And you went to Oile Regel. Could you imagine millions of Jews in Jerusalem, right? And they're all there for one purpose, to worship God in the Beis Hamikdash. So they're all bringing their Korban Pesach, which is a tremendous ruchnistic experience, right? And then they're talking to each other, mechazik each other, network with each other, going to shiurim, and so on. Who knows what it was like? You see, we don't even know. We don't even dream about what that was in the olden days. And that's part of the Churban, you see. So essentially, we cannot elevate ourselves. It's a struggle every day to elevate oneself. And then the third thing, forget about elevating ourselves. We are always diminishing. We are always falling. Think about that. How many times a day goes by and all of a sudden, hey, what happened to me today? I'm thinking about things I never thought about the day before. We diminish, you see. Now, one of the reasons why God wants us to diminish, because since we are sinning, right, it removes or diminishes the culpability that we have. Because we are less guilty if we sin, if we are less spiritual. So therefore the Satan cannot prosecute us because we're less guilty because I don't know anything, you see. So that's the flip side of the fact that we diminish in spirituality. But we do, which is terrible, you see. This is our golus. We cannot be who we are. That's what golus is. Forget about positions or countries or locations. That's not golus. I don't care where you are. You could live in Jerusalem, you could live in the old city. You are in golus because of all these ideas that I just said. This is Churban. We don't even realize, we are so far away from devastation, we don't even realize that we are devastated. We just don't realize we're out of contact, you see, you know. In a certain way, it's like it's like the land of the blind, where everybody's blind. They're all blind. They don't even know they're blind because everybody's blind. They don't know what sight is. We are so far from Ruchnius, we don't even understand, we are not conscious of the fact of how far we are removed. This, in the end, is the Churban itself. And that's why we mourn. You see, it's not something we mourn over the physical destruction, you see, of the Beis Hamikdash. And it's not only we mourn because God is not amongst us, you see, and also that the Torah is so difficult to learn and have access and so on. And it's not only the fact that we are in exile where the Goyim have dominion over us. The problem is that we cannot express who we are. We cannot be who we could be. You know, the American Army has an expression, you know, be all you can be. You know, that's a very interesting statement. It's funny, how did they chop that? You know? How did they realize that? You know what I'm saying? And they realized, you know, that, and what they were saying, what they really were saying is what? Come to the army and you go out of Golus. Think about that. Because if you could be what you could be, that's the end of Golus. What an advertisement. Come to the army and you leave the exile. Of course, the mistake is that's exactly when you go into the exile, when you go into the army, and so on, you know. But they understood the greatest blessing that a person can have is to be what he can be potentially. What a bracha, that there's no ikuvim, there is no obstacles, there's no hindrances, that I can actually be what I can be. Wow, that will happen in the Messianic era. That's the beauty of it, you know. And not only that, but once you could be what you could be, which means the Satan is dead, he's killed in the time of Sheikh Ben David, then every person can be what he can be, but it won't just be, it's going to take me eons to do that. No, the acceleration of what you can be ultimately is exponential. It is not arithmetic, 2 plus 2. It is not geometric, 2 times 2. It is exponential, 2 to the power of 2. That's what's going to happen, you see. And in that era, it's beyond belief what we will experience, because we are no longer in Golus. Because exactly, Golus means we finally can be what we can be, and we have access to everything that is God, finally is, and I now have access to Him, you see. Because He also is out of Golus, you see. It's very important to focus on, you know, we are in a terrible exile, all three of us. God, His Torah, and we, the Neshama, you see. We are all in Golus. And we go through it every single day. You see? It's a very important concept. Don't think because you had a great day, oh, wow. No. Wait till tomorrow. You know? And somebody's going to cook up something. There's something, I guarantee you, he's going to cook up and say, oh, you're smiling today. Let's wait till tomorrow and see what you do tomorrow. You see? Because that's the Gzeir of Golus. And this is what we have to struggle and we have to fight. Why? Why do we have to do this for? Well, how is Golus a remedy? You know, it's a torture. It's a nightmare. Why? Because here's the deal, right? You guys abandon me. You guys sin all the time, right? You got to prove that you want me back. Remember I said? The father threw his son out, right? He said, you want me back? Fine, but you got to come. You need to realize what you lost and you got to want me back. Okay? And then, if you want me back, then I'll take you back. What is Golus really? Think about that. Golus is nothing more than a situation, and I mean any form of Golus, even in the old city. Golus is nothing more than a situation that forces you to be Moisei Nefesh. That's what it is. Where God says, you want me back? Let's see how much you're willing to struggle for this. That's what a Golus is. You begin to understand the logic of this. This isn't because, God says, by the way, I want to get even with you guys. It has nothing to do with that. Golus, Churban, Beis HaMikdash, destruction, like Rabbi Akiva said, is a tikkun. But what is the tikkun? The tikkun is Mesiras Nefesh. Struggle. You didn't make it today. See what you do tomorrow. You're going to give up, walk away, say, I had enough of this? No. You're going to come back again and again and again. And that shows you the love you have of God. You see? And based on that concept, where you show the incredible Mesiras Nefesh, then God says, aha, you guys have done it. You guys really want me back? I'm coming back to you. That's the secret of the mechanism of Golus. It forces us to struggle. You see. And now you can understand something which most people don't understand. Daf Yomi. Why is there a Daf Yomi today? Why didn't Chazal and the Gemara say, hey, let's learn a plot a day? You ever wonder? Okay, Rameir Shapiro, actually before him was the Chortkova, who really thought about the concept of Daf Yomi. Oh, there's a Daf Yomi. Wow, it's great. There's hundreds of thousands of people. In fact, they're going to make the Siyum on January 1st. Do you ever ask yourself, where did this come from? Is it that somebody thought about this? No. Nothing is by accident. The great thing is that the Jew who did think about it advertised that, and it happened. But you know what the concept of Daf Yomi really is? It's Golus. What does that mean? Here's where it works. In the end of time, right, it gets worse. The Golus gets worse, you see, and it all forms. There's all kinds of internet problems, and there's pleasure problems, and there's immorality, you know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of craziness going on, especially with the politicians and all. This is crazy what's going on in today's world. It's like we're beset with everything that can stop us. We have it. See, what a mazel, you see? So things will get darker. There's a reason why things get darker, but let's assume it does. So here's what the Baruch Hashem says. Wait a minute, there's a problem here, right? Because remember what Golus is. Golus is a mechanism that you must be Moisei Nefesh. That will tell me you really love me, right? You really want me. That's what Golus is. But if it's going to get darker, so guess what? Jews will not know Torah, because that's part of the darkness, right? Klal Yisrael is going to be filled with Amoratzim. So then, if they're filled with Amoratzim, how are they going to be Moisei Nefesh? You see, because they have to be Moisei Nefesh. They have to learn Torah. But if the decree is that there be Choshech, Hester, before the end of time, then how are Jews going to be Moisei Nefesh? How are Jews, right, since they're Amoratzim, what are they going to do? So Baruch says, aha, Daf Yomi. Think about this. A guy gets up, right? He guy gets up 5 a.m., right? He walks in a daze. He sits down and there's a Rav and there's another 5 people, right? 10 people, right? What does he do? He takes, his eyes are falling down, right? Because he's 5 a.m., right? So he takes 2 toothpicks and he puts them under his eyes, you see? And he actually lifts his eyes and he tapes the top of his eye to his brow so it won't close. That's Mesiras Nefesh. Think about that. And it's not only that, it's not only Mesiras Nefesh. Then after the hour goes by, right, the guy gave a shir, and guess what? The only one who knows anything about the Gemara is the guy who gave the shir. You don't. What can you know in a Gemara, in a blot, in an hour? In fact, Daf Yomi, right? You know what they'll be able to say on January 1st? I forgot the whole shas. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't make them make a chayzik of it, but you have to be honest. Daf Yomi is not education. This is not the way you learn in school. Imagine if you went to school, you want to be a medical doctor, and said, well, you got to read a page a day. What do you mean a page a day? I got to know my stuff. You see? So then what is Daf Yomi? It's to make sure that Jews are by hook or by crook. They're going to go through 2,711 pages. Taking 7.5 years. What a Mesiras Nefesh. So the Moshe solved this problem. that even in a generation which is darkness, and nobody knows anything, because what can you know if you learn, 7.5 years, you do a blot a day, what do you really remember? For the lucky ones, maybe they can spend a couple of hours on it, they know something. But the average guy doesn't really know. How can you? Gemara is a very difficult thing to know in 5 hours, let alone in 45 minutes. All right? But what it does do, you have to be moiser nefesh. Don't you see the design here? This is not an accident. That's what the Rebbe did. What he did is he created things where you can exhibit mesiras nefesh, self-sacrifice, right? In a generation that is completely dark, absent of ruchnius. You see, and that's why. That is why, if somebody walks into a farm store, and he's not religious at all, right? And all of a sudden he walks in and he sees a book, a sefer, that talks about, belief in God, and he says to himself, yeah, it's interesting. Maybe I should check it out, right? He takes it out and buys it. That was tremendous mesiras nefesh. And that is as valuable as anything a guy can do. You don't realize what that is. Because in a generation that is completely dark, and God's presence is concealed, and we cannot elevate, we diminish, and the goyim destroy us with anti-Semitism, and then they block us, like the insane people in New York that say, hey, with the education, you need to have at least 7 subjects, or whatever you got to have. Wait a minute, whatever happened to the Torah, or what they do in England, and so on. And even over here, mesiras nefesh is the key to your redemption today, in an atmosphere of darkness. You see? So when you think about it, that's the churban. We don't realize the golus. We don't realize how far we are. It's not just because you go to a place, the Kosel, and you're sitting there and there's no Beis Hamikdash. Instead, there's a mosque and so on. That's true. That's where God said, I destroyed physically what has to happen. You see? But that is not the real goal. The goal is that we are imprisoned. We are paralyzed. This is the problem. So therefore the remedy for that is mesiras nefesh, self-sacrifice. Let's see how much you guys are going to desire to come back to me. That's why it says in the Gemara in Brachos, when you are rewarded for a mitzvah, what determines the amount of reward? And the answer is, lefum tsaro agra. According to the tsar, the pain is the reward. That's a very strange statement. I would say, well, according to the greatness of the mitzvah. Hey, I'm Shem Shabbos, wow, Or I would say maybe not only the greatness of the mitzvah, but also how many mitzvahs you did. You see? Why does the Gemara say lefum tsaro? Based on the amount of pain you experienced, which means self-sacrifice. Obviously, doesn't mean little pain. It means how much pain do you have to give up to do this mitzvah? The whole reward of a person today and even then is according to what are you saying in terms of your mesiras nefesh. You see? That's really what it's all about. These are chazal. I'm not making them up. As they say, I don't charge tax, I just collect it. You see? I'm just telling you what chazal say. But the problem is that you have to understand what chazal mean. What really is the gut, the bottom line of this? We are in a terrible state of golus. You see? And it's so bad, we don't even know we're in golus. That's why there's a double lesson of hastir. And hastir ponai b'yemahu. I will surely conceal my face on those days, which means that not only will I be gone, you won't even know I'm gone. You don't even know you're in golus. That's the churban. Really, a person, you don't have to go to the Kosel. I'm not saying you shouldn't. That's not where the churban is. The churban, sit down in your house, and says, whatever happened to me? What's going to become of me? You see, where am I going? You see, how do I get out of this paralysis? That's the golus. That's the churban. You see, you need to understand where it's really at. Everybody's making a mistake. They think that the churban is because you have no Beis Hamikdash. No, the Beis Hamikdash is a symptom. It's one of the manifestations that keep us in golus. You see, so why go there? I'm not saying you shouldn't. You of course should, because maybe over there you'll awaken. You see, and so on, But the real golus is self. The self-imprisonment, you see, of what's called the klipa, of the satan, you see, of all the terrible things that happen to us in the world, and all the obstacles we have to go through, you see. And there are so many obstacles that we have, unfortunately, Sometimes a guy's married to a spouse, she stops him. Sometimes she's married to a guy, he stops her, you see, or the kids stop you, or your boss stops you. You see what I'm saying? Or somebody else stops you. There's always somebody that forces you to declare, I love God, and I don't care what. I'm going to struggle and try as much as possible to get close. Whatever God lets me. How great is that? How great is that? Well, I'm going to give you hope. How great is that movement? I will tell you. There's the original Rabbi Yisrael Merizhin, says two very incredible statements. It was Original Rebbe was one of the greatest of the Rebbes, and so on. Biana today in Eretz Yisrael is of course descendant of the original. The original Rebbe said two things, which are incredibly instructive. One, how bad will it be? How bad is the Hester? How bad is the Choshech today? It's an interesting question. If we had to measure it, right? Here's what he said. You remember Eliyahu on Har Carmel? Eliyahu, the Jews were worshipping idols. So finally Eliyahu said, enough is enough. Okay, let's see. Who are you going to declare allegiance to? So he goes up to Har Carmel with the Baal, the priest of Baal, right? And they both have two different altars, right? And here's going to be the supreme test, right? So the Baal have their animal on their altar, Mizbeach, and Eliyahu prepares his animal on his Mizbeach, right? And he says, okay, here's the test. And it was a clear sky. If the lightning bolt comes down, there's going to be a lightning bolt out of a clear sky. You can't even pretend there's a cloud, right? If it goes on the Baal, then that is the real truth. And if it goes on my korban, which is, the korban of Klal Yisrael, then that is the truth. What a contest. Could you believe this? Out of a clear sky, So what happens? So the Baal guys, they realize, and they agree to this test, right? So what are they doing? They're ripping because their worship was they would cut themselves, to show how much they love their God, whatever, and so on. It's not happening. Hours go by and it's just not happening. Finally one guy goes under. He figures he's smart. He goes under the altar of Baal. He lights a match and he figures he's going to put the match. And they say, "Oh, it was a lightning strike," And of course, God says, "Excuse me," So he sent a snake, a viper. He bit the guy. The guy dropped dead right under the altar. So that was the end of that attempt, right? And of course, nothing happened. Then it comes toward the mincha, Tfilas mincha, and Eliyahu brings up his prayer, which of course is an incredible prayer, and so on. Praise, please, Rabbi Hashem, this is it. We're down to the wire. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, out of a clear sky, an incredible lightning bolt comes out, devours the animal, devours the altar, and even devours part of the ground, and everybody is stunned because it is an open display of the power of God. And then, of course, everybody says the famous statement, Hashem Elokim, which of course we say on Yom Kippur. Now, here's what the Rishna says. That's the story. So here's the Rishna says, listen carefully, it's an unbelievable statement, that in the end of time, if you want to know how dark it's going to be, right, then just imagine that the lightning bolt didn't come down on Eliyahu's korban, it came down on Baal. And God still expects you to love him. What? In other words, God is maskim with the Rishonim. It's been unbelief. That's how bad the Hester is going to be. Where it looks like they're right, all the evil people, the immoral people, right? All these people who do terrible things and so on. And immoral doesn't have to mean just immorality. It means the guys who are into pleasure, into money, into power, into covet. They're all successful, right? That they will be successful. That's how bad the darkness is. Where it looks like God is totally in their corner. Now, how in the world are you going to have any emunah? You see? That's how bad the difficulty is going to be. That's what the Rishna says. Where the lightning bolt comes down on korban of Baal, not Eliyahu. What's the reward for this? For those who hold on, because in the end God says, listen, it's like, I'm going to put you to the extreme test to see how much you love me. who experienced the extreme test? Avraham Avinu, the Akedas Yitzchak, right? Imagine he's commanded to kill his kid, and we're talking about Avraham Avinu. I mean, then his son was beyond belief, and Avraham Avinu has to decide, listen, none of this makes sense, because God doesn't do this. God doesn't require human sacrifices. You see, this whole thing is irrational because God said that the Jews will go through you. And obviously if Yitzchak is dead, Jews ain't coming through him, right? So the whole thing makes no sense, right? But I don't care. I love God so much. He says it, I'll do it. So the Akedas Yitzchak is the greatest Mesiras Nefesh probably that a tzaddikim of us ever did. If you think about that. Just think about what would it take for you to put your son on the altar and kill him. You wouldn't do it, right? And so on, right? Anyway, so Rabbi Yisrael Merijan says that the reward of a Jew living today, in this time, which is the greatest darkness of all, the greatest Hester, right? It requires the greatest Mesiras Nefesh. His reward is equal to Avraham Avinu in the Akedah. You can believe what that is? We live off the Akedah on Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, for 2,000 years. The merit of the Akedah we still are getting because of what he did. So could you imagine the average Jew, right, that does this kind of an act in the environment of such total absence of God? Not only absence of God, total victory and success of evil. He still remains religious, or he does a mitzvah, that his reward is as great as the Akedas Yitzchak. It's unbelievable. Why? Really his act was simple. But in a time when there's nothing, and in a time when the lightning strike hits Baal, this is what it takes. So anybody who does a mitzvah today, anybody who does tshuva, you see, will experience the reward for everything he does as great as Avraham Avinu with the Akedah, based on what Rabbi Yisrael Merijan, and believe me, he's got credibility. We can believe what he said. He's one of the greatest of the Hasidic masters, and so on, you see. This then is something you really have to think about, very important. Most people, unfortunately, are not aware what Tisha B'Av is. Tisha B'Av, of course, it's about the Beis HaMikdash. That's what's called the impetus. You see, the real Churban is we are paralyzed. We cannot get close to God. We cannot elevate our potential, and every day is another diminishment. You see, and try as we can, we somehow, so many times, never make it. Why? Because the ultimate test that God wants, and now you understand the secret of Golus, I am going to subject you to darkness. How much do you want to get back to me? You see? It's the ultimate test. And that is the secret, that is the logic of what exile really is. And hopefully the Jewish people, now obviously many Jewish people tragically are gone. Millions of Jews are gone, you see. But God has a cheshbon for them. You know, he will take one guy, you know, the guy's 70 years old. He's married to a shiksa, right? And he's got 6 different kids, all goyim, right? How's he gonna get Olam Haba, right? So one day he's walking and he sees a synagogue. He says, you know, very interesting. I'm gonna go in, take a look at it. And he goes in and he sees guys davening really fervently, right? And he sees maybe the Sefer Torah and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden he says to himself, you know, it could have been very interesting maybe if I had led a religious life. And then he walks out, never to come back. That man has Olam Haba. Because the entire life of this person was built around that one nisayon, that one test. Would he in some way have a hero tshuva? That's it. That's all God wanted. And there are people that do that. They have a hero tshuva and then they go back to their old ways. But in today's time, that hero tshuva is so monumental, you see, that will get him Olam Haba. And we don't know that. You see, we think, well, the guy's not a tzaddik, he's a rebbe, he's a chassid, he gets Olam Haba. Everybody else is condemned to Gehenna. We have no idea, and that's why Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi or his son, they said the following. He was able to go into a trance, project himself, and he was conscious of the upper worlds. And then he came back. You see? So they asked him, what'd you see up there? And they were able to do that. That's called Ruach HaKodesh, by the way. Not the one we have today, but the real Ruach HaKodesh is where you can subject your consciousness to the upper worlds and talk to Malachim. In any case, and they asked him, what did you see up there? And the answer is, he said, it's incredible. It's an oilam hofechu. It's what's called in Yiddish a verdrehte world. It's a completely topsy-turvy world. Whoever is great here, up there is the nobody. Not everybody, but you could be a nobody. And here they're all running after you. And up there you're a nobody. And here you're a nobody, and up there all the malachim are running after you. What does that tell you? We can't measure the greatness of anybody because we don't know the weight, the value of that person's nisayon. We don't know. Only God knows. We do not have the measuring yard to measure. That's what we see. Therefore, don't give up. You never know. It could be that the next mitzvah you do, you will get olam haba in a way that you cannot even begin to imagine. So that's the message I leave. Don't despair. It's difficult, that's true, right? But remember, the main thing is, don't worry. It's ordained that there's going to be an unbelievable hester, that's true. But don't give up because we do not know the weight, the value of every mitzvah you do. You see, and look, everybody's here. You didn't have to be here. I'm sure you got other stuff you could have done tonight, right? But you decided to come and stay. We don't know what the value of that. So a guy can say, what's the big deal? I came to a shiur. No. What did you have to give up to come to this shiur? You see? What did you have to give up? You don't know. Or you do know, but you don't know its worth. Don't make a mistake. We have no idea of the value of what we do. It is unbelievably awesome. And that's really what God wants. He wants a Jew to display his love of God in the incredible darkness. You see, don't abandon me. That's what God says. If you do that, then that is the true way of understanding Tisha B'Av. That is really what it's all about. The gullus, the paralysis, the struggle, and so on, that we all go through, you see. I'll just end with this one idea. It says in Shulchan Aruch, it says, Roy l'chol yirei shamayim, in the beginning. Every God-fearing Jew, right? Roy l'chol yirei shamayim, it is proper for every God-fearing Jew, right? Shehi meitzav v'doyeg al churban Beis HaMikdash, that he should be concerned with the destruction on the Beis HaMikdash. That's what it says in the Shulchan Aruch. So the Kotzka says, and he's going to come out with an incredible concept. He says, wait a minute, what do you mean somebody who's God-fearing should worry and be concerned about the destruction of the temple? And if you're not God-fearing, you shouldn't? Obviously you should, on the more so. So the Kotzka says, just an incredible idea. He says, what it really says is, every God-fearing Jew has to be concerned about the Beis HaMikdash destruction, because he can't elevate himself. Somebody who's not God-fearing doesn't have to be so much concerned about the destruction of the temple. He's got to be concerned about his own destruction, his own churban. That's what he's got to be concerned with. It's a classic Kotzka vort, and so on, you see. But in the end, that's what it is. You have to ask yourself, who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Can I improve? And that in itself is the greatest thing you can do on Tisha B'Av. You see. Well, let's hope that before Sunday, Mashiach is going to come, right? And he's going to take us out of the gullus. You see? And the first thing he's going to do is raise our consciousness, because that's got to be raised first. You see? Forget about the Beis HaMikdash. First thing is we have to realize what is happening. We are in a fog. So he's going to raise our consciousness. And once he raises our consciousness, of course, then the redemption can actually happen. And I believe it already is happening in terms of what's happening today and so on. We think we're looking at, political events and so on. But you have no idea. All of this is incredible. And for those who have listened to my videos, from the election of Trump, which is a miracle in itself, right, to the fact of what he's doing, to Eretz Yisrael, the rise, Israel is rising amongst the nations of the world, which never happened. In fact, there was just a poll in the UN that Israel is the 10th greatest economy. It's astounding what they did. What was that? Industrial, yeah. And what does Israel have? 8.5 million people? It's a joke. Israel has less than 1/4 of 1% of the world's population, right? And they're rising, and all the nations begin to run after them. They want to move their embassies here. They want to run after them because they realize, hey, you got the goods, and we want the goods. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and so on. That's what's really happening, you see. So the Gula is happening. It's in the process. Take a little more time, but we see that it's happening, and so on, So that's what you have to think about. The concept of Golus, the concept of what a Jew really has to do, and why there is a Golus, what the real Churban is. If you do that, then you cannot believe how lucky you will be when finally the curtain is lifted and everybody sees the truth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, 1 second, yeah. The what? That's the meaning of the Golus, the darkness, yeah.
Isn't there also a concept that of kapara, meaning that suffering itself pays, and suffering itself is a tikkun, even if there is no serious nefesh?
Yes. But there's two kinds of sufferings. There's a suffering which you don't want to come on you, and then there's a suffering which you voluntarily do. Mesiras Nefesh is really in the class of a mitzvah because it's what you voluntarily do. See, so it's not the same as suffering which isn't imposed on you. You see the difference? In other words, if you struggle and that's called pain, then that's part of the mitzvah. It's not considered this suffering that you get, which you have nothing to, which comes on you involuntarily. See, it's a different type of level. Wait, you
mentioned the significance of the fox, right?
Yes, fox. Hey, somebody's keeping tabs. You know why? What is the reputation of a fox? A very wise, crafty, right, creature, right? When that fox went out, right, what it was saying is, you're looking at Churban, right? But be smart, you're really looking at Tikkun. In other words, what the fox says is be smart. Don't think you're looking at what's called a Churban. Wise up. You're looking at Tikkun. And that's why it's a fox. To get you to understand what you're really seeing. Interesting. Yeah?
Isn't there a concept of...
I can't hear you, what? The darkness, yeah.
Very dark,
Yes?
very black,
Yes?
and the little light becomes lighter, no?
Yes. Oh yeah, sure.
So if we,
Like the sunburst.
what you said, to learn the little Torah or something,
Yes. Yes. So, correct, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand one concept what you said about a Jew never does anything all his life, and he's assimilated, and one time he comes to shul, and that, like, I didn't understand, that was his tikkun, or now he was able to achieve oil haba. I didn't understand what you mean.
You have to not make a mistake, and this is the mistake. You need to get into Olam Haba, right? You need to avoid Gehenna. Well, actually, you need to avoid annihilation, right? So there's called an entry fee. Then the question is, how much Olam Haba you'll get? You see? So it could be that guy who was nothing his whole life, that was his entry fee.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he's going to get an Olam Haba like everybody else, the tzaddikim. But the key is get into Olam Haba. Right? That's the key. So but that's what it means. That's the tikkun. He got into Olam Haba. You see? But don't think, well, hey, that's all I have to do. That means I can live a great life, till 80 years old, and I'll just walk into a shul and say, wow, maybe I should have done this. No, it doesn't work that way. Because there's getting into Olam Haba, and then is what is your Olam Haba look like? And so on. That's, don't make that mistake. Anyway.
I was saying that because in the Midwest, so I know a lot of people, they would keep Shabbos, they grab their car and they want to go on Yom Kippur, they say, oh, did they say Kaddish yet? And they come in just for that.
That's a mitzvah.
Yeah, it's a mitzvah. But they think, you know what? I'm Yoitza. I mean, I said Kaddish.
Yeah. What? Fine.
So isn't it like...
That's the Sutton.
A cop out?
I want to tell you something. but the fact that they went in to say Kaddish, how many people don't go in to say Kaddish, right? The fact that they went, God knows the weight of every mitzvah. We don't. So He knows exactly what its value is. That's all.
He feels that I know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
I really don't have to do anything else the entire year.
Fine.
I said,
That's
"Got it.
part. Yes.
I'm clear.
Yeah, that's part of his error. However, the fact that he valued Kaddish enough, which means to go in a shul and say Kaddish, which means God is present, that itself has a weight.
Yes, okay.
Sure, of course has a weight.
Clarify one point, maybe?
What was that?
Maybe I'll clarify one point that might help people understand.
Yeah, okay.
Like the idea of chorus is like separating yourself, but if you feel connected, it's a measure for measure, meter connected meter. Someone who feels or wants to be connected, it's the tikkun for chorus. I mean,
Okay, yeah. Anyway, that's why there's a difference. Got to get in. That's your task is get into Ilam Haba, right? Once you're in, then they'll figure out how much you get. Some guy's going to walk away with a palace, some guy walk away with a hut. And it all depends. But I want to tell you something. A hut, even if that's what you wind up, that's only a metaphor, is infinitely greater than any palace on this planet by any emperor you ever saw.
Right.
Oh yeah, don't think I just use these as a comparison. But the minimum Olam Haba is infinitely greater than anything you could ever do in Olam Hazeh.
This physical world.
Correct.
Can I say that
Yes.
the Quran is
What?
Can I say that the Quran
Yes.
structure is really pre-designed?
Yes.
But then how can God?
No, it's not that it's pre-designed. That if the Jews, it's called method B. If the Jews don't do the mitzvahs and repent, then method B kicks in and they'll be able to come back that way. So it's pre-designed to be a secondary method. But the Jews didn't have to select that way. There would be no golus if the Jews would do the mitzvahs. If there was no sinners, no. So it's not preordained, it's pre-designed. There's a difference. Yes. What? You need to speak louder?
There's a story that you tell, I can't even say it as well as you say it, about how the Chofetz Chaim had a student that came
Oh, that guy, yeah.
drunk.
Yeah, okay.
Say that.
He gave it up, yeah. That's it. Yeah. I don't want to go through the whole story, but what?
I want you to share the story.
Share the story. People have patience for a story. It's a short story, but I don't. Whatever. I'd rather answer the questions. Yeah, go ahead.
So we know Rabbi Akiva was a great figure.
Yes.
Everything he did, Baruch the whole thing, and I wonder what's the learning from him questioning Zechariah's prophecy. Like if it was the way it's presented more, it's like Akiva was like, I'm not sure if that was going to come true.
Well, no, you have to understand what he meant. He says because if the Jews sin, so if the Beis Hamikdash is not destroyed, there's no remedy. So of course there can't be a redemption. But when I saw that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, it meant that God put in the injection, and now I know the guy's going to get cured. That's what he said. In other words, that's why one prophecy is dependent on the other prophecy. You see, there has to be the introduction of a remedy. Then the guy can get cured. So that's what Rabbi Akiva says. Until the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of the sins, right? Then I didn't know. There's no remedy. So how are they going to get out of this? How are you going to have redemption without a remedy? Or with a medicine? Yeah, you know the medicine story, right? Without a medicine, I get cured. But when Rabbi Akiva said, so therefore when the destruction happened, that was the medicine, so therefore I know the redemption will definitely happen. Got it? Wow. Everybody knows everything. That's great. Okay, thank you. I'm giving two more shurim, the greatness of Torah. Young, take and so of course you were invited. Yes, you have a question?
I always know something in Jeff. So do you see common?
Who?
Common.
Who's coming? I don't understand.
Commonality.
A commonality, okay, yeah.
Thank you. See, so my English is...
It's okay, it doesn't make a difference, it's okay.
between breaking Lucas and destruction of Beit HaMikdash.
Yes. The breaking of the Luchas, right, was the inability of the Mashiach to come. The Luchas Rishonis was the messianic light. When that broke, then the Mashiach, who happened to have been Moshe Rabbeinu, he's Mashiach ben Yosef, then it was gone. He could no longer be Mashiach. So that's the messianic light. That's the entire Messiah entry was gone. This, right, is what the destruction of this is that you guys are not doing method A, which is to do mitzvahs and tshuva. Therefore, I now have to institute method B, and that'll be your remedy. That'll be your path. You see? So one is messianic, and the other is not messianic, but it's to get to Olam Haba.
This is
So on.
high Kabbalah.
Whatever.
What I see it is God cannot tolerate inconsistency of behavior of Jews and what He expects from them, why He created them.
You don't understand? No. God tolerates everything. That's not the problem. The problem is that we have to live up to a certain code. He tolerates. I want to tell you something. If God couldn't tolerate, guess what? After Noach, after the Mabel, there would be no world, right? But God has infinite patience, A. He has infinite Rahmanas, B. And He knows, you see? He knows everybody's going to sin. But what He does is He designs different paths to the redemption itself. But believe me, He's got a lot of patience. Far more than you and I.
Am I allowed one more question?
No, well, yeah.
I don't remember where it was. I see this said.
Yeah?
Says if it would be one side.
If what?
One side. It would be one side that would really feel that the guns, the Shekhinah,
Yeah?
we could have ruled immediately.
Yes. Well,
Would it be three on that level?
well, I have to ask you, so what does that really mean? I don't know if that's even true.
Okay.
You have to really ask you, what in the world does that mean?
Yeah.
Can one man bring the gula because he feels? And that.
There must be some meaning to it, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, Mars in a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Oh, well. Hi.
Shama shir shir chadam